I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Friday edition of Conversations with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. We call our Friday program the Healing Circle. We do this in conjunction with our colleagues and friends over at the African American uh, Child Wellness Institute, an organization created and led by Dr. Bravada Garrett-Akinsanya and her team. She's also the principal at Braken's Psychological Services and Consulting. I tell people every time that not only is she a friend and I'm a member of her board of directors, chair of the board, but I'm also a patient, a customer that I value the ability to use and engage, benefit from therapy. And so I have a therapy session with my Braken's therapist every Thursday after my program. And I tell you, I say this because I want to encourage Black people in general, Black men in particular, to do self-care, to be intentional, and to not be deterred by stigma or disinformation about our need and our desire and our capacity to continue to move towards health and healing. We all need it. We certainly deserve it. We deserve to be healthy, and we deserve to be the very best people that we can be. I'm pleased to have today a special program. We had built in a conversation with our friends, our colleagues over at North Memorial. We'll continue with that after the first segment, but I want to say hi to Jessica uh, Kingston and Anthony Taylor. Hello, guys. Thank you for being here. We're going to get into what North Memorial is doing in DE&I and in the community and the work that you're doing in collaboration. But before that, we want to begin by our special opportunity to talk to friend, leader, and representative of Minnesota, a 5th district in the U.S. House of Representatives, Ilhan Omar. Ilhan, good to see you. Welcome. Thank you. What's on your mind right now? And I say that with three things in my mind: George Floyd, with Texas, and with Buffalo, New York. And I hope you saw that we printed your comments, which were very appropriate and timely, in the upcoming edition of Inside News. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, Al, and good afternoon to everyone. I wish we were all in one space, but virtual. All of those tragedies that you just talked about are on my mind. It's been really hard to, absorb all that people are feeling, everything that is happening around us. Also try to find ways to center the people who are experiencing the trauma directly, people who are impacted by it, and find ways to express optimism, hope, for the future that lessens these kinds.
Your sound is going in and out, Representative. So we lost the last two words or so.
No, I was saying it's the last part I said was it's hard, in the same time as you're trying to be a community member to everyone who's experiencing the traumas that we've been subjected to, and coming up with solutions to address many of the ills that are causing these traumas for our community. It's been a challenge.
Let me ask you, from your position in leadership in the U.S. Congress, how does the nation look at what happened in your district with George Floyd 2 years ago, and the fact that it ignited a call for reckoning, a call for change, not only in this town, but around the country and even around the world? How do your colleagues look to you for meaning and understanding, and what can you share with them to help them create better policy in safety, public safety, in mental health, and beyond?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's really in many ways because George Floyd, what happened to George isn't just something that people here in Minneapolis.
So we're having some bandwidth, Representative. You're frozen right now. Yeah.
Can you hear
Let
me?
me do this. She can get reset here. Let me call in my colleague, Dr. Bravada Garrett-Akinsanya. Dr. B, how you doing?
I'm doing well this morning, this afternoon rather.
Okay.
And I'm glad to see this beautiful, illustrious team of folks who are going to be commenting on our wellness, politically, emotionally, spiritually. And I'm always happy to see my sister Omar bringing it as she does, no matter where she shows up. So
Well,
wonderful day.
she's back now. Let me try to get you back, Ilhan. Yeah, we recognize there are always technical challenges with bandwidth, so let's keep going, okay?
My apologies. Did you all not hear what I shared?
The latter part.
You froze midstream, so go ahead and review it again. So.
Okay. As I was trying to say, what happened to George is not just a community event or something that our community has to reckon with. It's become national and international, and I think it sparked a conversation because you can't dismiss it in the ways that other incidents and the ways that we've seen people dismiss it. And so it's been really interesting to have people in the district, other members of Congress, have conversations right after we were able to bury George. I had members of Congress come in and do a listening session.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not sure what happens. Here we go again. Dr. B, just jump in whenever this happens. Just keep the conversation going until she comes back in.
Okay, because she's really hitting on. There she is.
Okay. Same thing, Ilhan, go ahead again.
Talking about a listening session.
I was saying this is why we also need to invest in broadband, because this is a tragedy. My apologies. No, I wanted to have some of my colleagues in Congress come into the district when we were burying George so that they can be in conversation. So we did a listening session with community members and community leaders at Sapathany, and we forced the elected leaders not to speak, to share their perspective, just to be there as part of the community, to hear directly from people and take what they were hearing back to Congress to figure out ways to address what our communities were experiencing. And seeing, that resulted in the Justice George Floyd, the legislation Justice for George Floyd Act. We've now seen the president do an executive order in getting some of those pieces into law, because we obviously didn't have the ability to pass it out of the Senate. But we've seen people have different conversations about not just what happens when we are faced with police brutality, when Black men are lynched in our communities, but also the kind of trauma and the generational trauma many of our communities have been dealing with that are left unaddressed. And so we've invested lots of resources in addressing mental health crises, coming up with better solutions in doing that. We have a task force now to address adolescent suicide in Black male youth. So a lot of those kinds of conversations were sparked because of some of the things that we've seen after the murder of George Floyd.
So think, if you would, about the incidences recently, just fresh in Texas and last week or so in Buffalo. How does that make you feel, number one, as a person, as a human being? You've written about it, about the anger and the frustration, but how should we all take that to inform public policy, public direction? What do you think?
It's horrifying to learn about what happened in New York, because in many ways, this is a young man who was clearly radicalized around the replacement theory. And there's active, organized institutions that are radicalizing young people to attack people who look like you and I. And that is not just something that we need to respond in addressing what that community is dealing with, but it's something that we also have to make sure that we address the fear that people are living with because of that, right? The traumas that we carry after these instances happen, if they are not addressed, we will find other instances that take place. And so that's why we passed the Domestic Terrorism Act legislation and try to make sure that, civil liberties and civil rights will be protected. And now that we're looking at what's happening in Texas, it's a reminder that when we don't act with urgency, right, with the other mass shootings that have happened, that these instances will continue to happen. And it's not only impacting, the children or others who are massacred in that sort of senseless, horrific way, but that horror that is experienced is going to continue to traumatize the survivors. It's going to traumatize the families. It's going to traumatize the community, and it's going to traumatize like the whole nation that is experiencing. And so, not only do we have to come up with
bandwidth again, Dr. B, jump in.
I think she's hitting on coming up with concrete ways of intervening. And I heard her say something about mental health. So I wanted to see if she could continue just that piece about how mental health is being managed. Because this is called the healing circle after all. And we're talking about how we heal through and beyond that. So I just wonder if Representative Omar could touch on that as she...
I think you're back, Representative.
Because she looks like she's not frozen anymore.
No,
Hello? Maybe she is still frozen.
Still there. Let me do this while we're waiting for her to restart or reset. Here she is. Just want to share with you I share my screen, the story that we have at Insight News by her. Go ahead and talk, Representative. We see you again now. So continue, Ilhan. Nope. So hold on. We'll do this. And
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Ilhan.
I don't know how much of what I said was heard, but
We heard most of it.
I did hear someone say, that we have to get in the process of healing. And I think there's two steps to that, right? Once there is accountability and justice, the community is able to sort of put the pieces together. And I know that in many of these instances, the person who commits the heinous act is held accountable, but the systems that have allowed for these heinous acts to take place are not. And so if we are not addressing the system that allows for an 18-year-old to purchase AR-15s and have over 1,000 bullets in his arsenal to massacre children, babies, right? As young as my little one, who's nine years old and in 4th grade, then we are going to have a harder time healing as a community if we're not addressing those who are radicalizing young people around the replacement theory that led to the massacre in New York. Then it's going to make it hard for the community to figure out how to heal and move forward. The same thing here with George Floyd. If we are not addressing the system with policing that has allowed for Derek Chauvin to stay in power and use his power to kill George Floyd, then it's going to make it hard for the community to heal. And I know this as someone who survived war. You know, it's been 30 some years since I was 8 and running for my life. I still haven't healed because the people who threatened my life, who displaced my family, who've killed my relatives have not been held accountable. And so I still live with that trauma. I'm still, you know, worried if I will ever run into them in the street. And I know that the systems that have created that civil war and that wreckage are still in place in my country of birth. And so when we think about what it looks like to heal as a community after a tragedy happens, we have to also think about, you know, addressing these systems that have allowed for that horror to take place.
Well, that's a powerful Representative Ilhan. You know, I hadn't thought about that, just the fact that, as you just described, you've got to live with the personal experiences. And it says something about the Black community and really all communities who experience trauma in different degrees, different levels, and how at some point in time, our society unfairly asks us to get over it, but we cannot. And there has to be mechanisms, processes, systems that allow us to engage healing power, our capacity to know, to understand, and to resolve those traumatic experiences in a way that allow us to move forward with a sense of completion, of restoration, and of being fulfilled human beings on the path to self-actualization.
And I will say, Al, you know, I think, and I know that your panelists are experts in this, but without the acknowledgement of trauma, one can't also be in the process of restoration, right? And there's so many of us, whether it is, you know, community violence, systematic trauma, whatever it is that has caused the traumas that we carry, as Ayanna Pressley says, in our backpacks on daily basis. If they are not acknowledged, we can't be in the process of restoring. And so, you know, we need communal acknowledgement, we need societal acknowledgement, we need institutional acknowledgement of these traumas, but we also need an acknowledgement for ourselves so that we can also seek the help that we need in order to start the process of healing.
Representative, thank you for taking time to be with us today. We appreciate you. Keep up the good work. I know that you're also entering into a campaign for re-election. We're going to invite you back as often as you're willing to come. We're going to be inviting your opponents as well. You know that, in the sense of a spirit of fairness. But it
is a democracy after all.
It's a democracy after all. And we think that you simply are sharpened and improved by principle challenges. We're concerned, though, about unprincipled activity, and that's what we have to guard against to defend the sanctity of the democratic potential and experience. So thank you for doing what you do, and you're welcome to come back anytime. We had a very narrow focus today. I would love to come back and talk to you about all the other things on your plate as a representative in the Congress and in national, international policy, but we'll do that at a later date. Thank you so much.
My apologies for the connection issues.
Well, it's just
love you all. Thank you.
Wonderful to see you here. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye. I'm Al McFarlane. We continue. And I want to thank her again just for her testimony and for her analysis, her sharing, and linking the issue to her personal story. That makes it real. You know, it's not like this is theoretic or theoretical. It's not like it's something that's over there. No, this is in my body, in my life, in my genealogy, in my DNA, and therefore it matters to me. And having said that, it says again that my life, my Black life matters to me, to my family, to the universe. Dr. B, I want to, before I introduce our guests and our friends from North Memorial, have you take a minute and both reflect on George Floyd, but also sort of do the normal introduction we do, setting the stage for these conversations with the Healing Circle and explaining for our guests what and how we do it. And then you can pass the talking stick to Jessi if you would.
Okay, thank you so much. One of the things that I think Representative Omar was hitting on that is core, and I think she said it well, is that healing has to first it has to first come out of an acknowledgement of woundedness and being aware that as Black people in this culture, we have woundedness and we are harmed often. And that harm has not stopped for hundreds of years. Soon as we think we've got a breath, we lose it again. And I think that's what is symbolic of George Floyd's death, the fact that he said, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And the lack of breath, the fresh air of equity, the fresh air of diversity and inclusion. We don't get to breathe that very often because wherever we go, we either have to hold on to that adage, what won't kill you will make you stronger. And so we've learned that as Black folks in America, that if we survive it, we can be stronger. But what about the ones who do get killed through that process? We forget about that. And the truth is, part of this circle is an acknowledgement of our own shared humanity. Part of the circle process is really about recognizing that it's not just me and my own healing, but if I go down, we all go down. I am because we are. And so that belief of our interconnectedness is the core setting for the circle process. So we use this circle because the circle has a space for everyone. And everyone in the circle has equal access to the middle, to have voice, which is the space of power. So no matter how educated or old or young you are, you're equal in that circle. Your voice is meaningful in that circle. The other thing that we do is we acknowledge our elders in every process because we know that they have sacrificed for us. We stand on their shoulders and we are where we are because they were who they were. And so we acknowledge our elders and then our ancestors. We acknowledge our ancestors because they're closest to our elders. They're closest to our creator. And when we acknowledge our ancestors, what we are saying is that we came from a long distance to be in this space. And that is a divine and sacred space to be in circle with one another. And so in this circle, the way we use it is if we were really in a circle together, we would use a talking stick and we would pass it from one person to the next. So we just use a virtual talking stick. And so in this space, we give ourselves an opportunity to talk about what our issues are, what our hopes and dreams are in this circle. So I will pass the talking stick to my sister. What's your name again?
Jessi Kingston.
Jessi Kingston. Thank you, sister. You got the stick.
And let me diverge a little bit and welcome you, Jessi Kingston, you and our colleagues at North Memorial Health. We've done a series of interviews and programs promoting innovation and engagement, and this is part of that series. So thank you for what you do and what you bring. And with that, I want to just give you time to introduce yourself and your work as the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And in the process, invite your colleague, my friend, Anthony Taylor, to talk about this outreach initiative that's significant and important. Thank you so much. So I'm going to pass the talking stick back to you, Jessi.
Thank you very much, both of you. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here in this circle, reflecting on how heavy these last couple of weeks have been. And it's important for us to be reaching out to one another and to sit. And this is a beautiful space to be able to do that, even continuing to process all the feelings that keep coming and happening. You know, at North Memorial Health, we've really been focusing a lot on that, both internally and externally, with how do we navigate trauma and change and understanding people's truly health and the impact, not only of these last couple of weeks, but these last 2 years. We talk about that this is the second anniversary for the murder of George Floyd by a police officer. And we can't unsee what we actually saw for over 9 minutes. And that doesn't go away, and that sits heavy, at least for me, on my heart right now. And I know in the Black community in particular, as we continue to see Black and brown bodies die, that weighs heavily. And layered on top of that is COVID-19 and this second pandemic that we are now in the third year and trying to navigate and figure out how to live. We are also, as an healthcare system, doing our community health needs assessment. And this is a time where we are truly engaging with our community more intentionally. And while we do this often, this is the time where we want to be having conversations and hearing from everyone to understand where they're at from a health perspective. What can we do as a health system with the community, in partnership with our community, to make systemic change to improve our health? I am thrilled that we have partnered with Cultural Wellness Center and Anthony Taylor and the entire team there to help lead us in these conversations over the next couple of months and again in the fall, as we learn how to navigate and I think heal and move forward as a community and in partnership. With that, I'm going to hand the talking stick, if that's okay, Al, to Anthony Taylor at this time.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's actually really great to see family on this. This was a surprise to see, Dr. Oliver and Sister Sonia on the call with me, people that I love and care about. And I think that this just speaks to the fact that the circle of people that are committed to our community's health actually is pretty small. Like we know each other. So we also have to reach out to each other as we do this work. But I think we're really excited about the partnership with North Memorial. I think that North Memorial and our partnership with the Cultural Wellness Center is very, very much defined around the idea that as someone in the healthcare system, as we connect to community, part of what we're doing with these events this summer is connecting, being in community, but also working to expand in some ways the way that our community imagines health for itself. I think that the idea of the way that living in trauma, living within these systems, sometimes one of the challenges for us is the normalization of what's happening for us in the community, the normalization of trauma. I love what you said about the idea that we think about, well, what does not kill us makes us stronger, and that acceptance almost to the point where now we start to do things that don't kill us. Right? I mean, you become to think about that as a strategy, and we really see it differently than that. So the course of the summer with North Memorial, we really plan on being in community, doing events that are really focused around active living, around community connectedness, around seeing culture as a foundational asset for well-being, that really gets the community to look at itself holistically and really understand the possibility of a real partnership with the resources of our healthcare system to actually design a new system that works in their own best interest, that works in building this capacity to heal, this capacity to expect more, to define health based on our wildest aspirations of how we want to live, and really have that flow into what we have really worked. And I think that we've worked with the state of Minnesota, the city of Minneapolis, and many people around redefining health as not the avoidance of disease, but actually as a measure of connectedness to self, to community, and to our families. And that our sense of agency to influence health is foundational. And so I really hope that you all will be prepared. We really want to show up with some different ways of engaging the activity. And again, when Sister Jessica talks about the idea of meeting community where they are, I think that we clearly understand that. And one of the ways that I think this shows up, even in terms of treating trauma, and I think it'll be great that the actual experts on this have an opportunity to speak to this later in the show. But sometimes we also we need a context and we need a description to understand that these things, these disparities, that this behavior, that some of the ways that it shows up, this is not our character or our nature, right? This is not who we are as a people, but in some regards is an actual response. It is a manifestation of how trauma and imbalance shows up in our lives. And so by helping the community have an explanation for this that clearly explains the situation, right? Based on the systems, based on history, based on these things. And now our goal is to increase community agency so that we are deeply engaged with the systems of North Memorial and all systems, that we stay deeply engaged with policy. It's great that you had Representative Omar on. We have to stay engaged with all the systems that impact our life and understand that our agency resides in our collective power, and that we can really, we can do this. And I really think this is a great opportunity. North Memorial, and again, Sister Jessi leading this, is saying that there is an opportunity to create something that does not exist now, but let's get to it. Let's get to it together. We can create this.
Thank you, Anthony. Let me interject here again and tell you and Jessi that what you're doing is novel and necessary, innovative, and we appreciate that. I always ask a lot of guests to tell their personal story. So, Dr. B, if you allow me the variation from the protocol right now, I'd like to come back to Jessi Knighton and ask you to do two things, Jessi. Give people the elevator speech about the institution. North Memorial Health is a treasured and historic leadership organization, business resource in Twin Cities, and particularly in North Minneapolis. Its campus in Robbinsdale is right on the edge of the north side. So our community and North Memorial have a history. That's a great history. People will testify to the quality of service and to the sense of being seen as human beings in seeking and receiving care at North Memorial. So I wanted you to take a minute to give those who don't know this relationship the elevator speech about North Memorial Health. But I also want you to take a minute to introduce Jessi. What's your story and what brings you to this moment, to this work? And as we talked about recognizing the ancestors, what does that mean to you in terms of your parents and your parents' parents, and how all of that pours into the moment that we're in right now? So that's a lot to put on you, but I'm passing the talking stick back to you. Anthony, get ready. Same question for you as well.
Well, thank you, Al. I'll begin by saying my journey to North really began a long time ago. I am adopted, and I grew up actually with white parents in white middle-class Minnesota. But I was very fortunate to have family who understood the need for change and were activists, and really instilled in me this notion of social justice and human rights. And it is something that I have fought for several years in organizations and in boards that I serve on. When I was looking for a new opportunity, diversity, equity, and inclusion being at the lead of that, I was impressed when North Memorial had this position posted. As you mentioned, Al, North Memorial Health, our Robbinsdale campus right next to North Minneapolis. We also have a hospital in Maple Grove and over 20 specialty clinics. The fact that we have this relationship with the Black community and several other communities has been so important, but there's also an acknowledgement that here in Minnesota, we have some of the highest racial disparities in the nation, and healthcare is not immune to that. And to be able to join an organization that values the diversity and all the dimensions of difference in our community, to lead work to help us improve our care, to provide culturally responsive care in the way that people need, not in the way that we think it should be, Our mission is to empower people to achieve their best health. We can't do that if we are telling people what we think it should be. It is a partnership and a conversation, intentional and authentic with our community to do this together. And that is the commitment that North has made within the Twin Cities, and in particular to North Minneapolis.
Great. Anthony, same question to you. Just jump in and go from there.
Yeah, well, thank you. I am definitely my claim to fame may be Elder Atum's son and Cannabelle Sheck's grandson and friend of Davila-Williams and really mentored by Al McFarlane. I think I am truly. It is amazing to now feel old and have been nurtured by amazing elders who I get to work with every day. But I think that is a really big part of it. And I think over a long time been an accidental advocate around active living as a foundational strategy for well-being, for us claiming our communities. It really started with something as simple as I just wanted more Black folks on bikes. But as I have grown and again been mentored by this network of adults, I've really begun to understand that what we're really talking about is mobility. That really, even on a bike, I'm reminding people that it simply represents the mobility we want in our lives, that really white supremacy and the systems we talk about, their primary function has been to control the mobility of Black people and Black bodies in all of different forms. And so it looks like it's about a bike ride. It may look like it's about healthcare, but it is really about this idea of self-propelled agency, mobility towards our aspirations. It is the ability to take others with us. And I really feel like that has really been the gift that I have received from all of you, as people that have been leading. And you've created the space for me to nurture me and really allow us to lead in this partnership with North Memorial. And I think that Jessi Knighton, really, I tell you, I'm on the phone with her all the time, and she is incessantly fighting for innovation on behalf of community and holding herself and the organization accountable to these ideas. So it's really a pleasure to be able to work in this value-based space where we will actually emerge this summer again in these activities, where we are going to do some things that are a little bit innovative. We do want people to experience themselves, right? Experience their communities. And we're doing it and I think it will be unique in a way that really when we're done, and a lot of people talk about engagement. What we really hope is when we are done, people are more engaged, that they're actually leaned in about a long-term relationship with North Memorial as a partner, right? Leaning towards better outcomes in terms of health. And I think that is really, really a valued outcome for us. So we may show up at your house with a bike, take you on a walk, drop off some papers, anything could happen. But really, again, this idea of really connecting us to the power we have, seeing North Memorial as a partner and a resource, and really owning the outcomes in our community. Those are the things that we aspire for. And so we hope to see you all working with us, as a matter of fact.
Anthony, thank you. Let me pass the talking stick back over to Dr. B, and you can bring in the rest of our team, Dr. B. This is a wonderful conversation. This is a great conversation, a necessary one. Dr. B?
Thank you. I actually was thinking as Brother Anthony was speaking about our right to be well. And that's one of the things I believe in my very soul. I believe that, especially as Black folks, if suffering is the price you pay to be able to be well, I think the price has been paid enough, and we're paid in full. It's time for us to claim the wellness that we deserve. And I'm just not talking about physical. I'm talking about psychological, spiritual, emotional, academically, vocationally. I'm talking about all types of wellness. And so at this table, we have folks who believe in our right to be well. And as I say in our Project Marua premeditated parenting boot camp, we have a right to wellness, and we should get it by any means necessary. And that means we need to learn to overcome our own fears and our own getting in our own way of being well. So with that, I'm going to pass it to my brother Oliver, Dr. Oliver Williams, who will, I'm hoping, pass it on to somebody else. So maybe Sister Brenda after you get through. Go ahead. You got the stick.
Yeah, I took myself off mute. So, as we talk about trauma, we realize that it's something that happens. It's not something that's outside that happens to us. It's something that happens internally, and it happens to us physiologically. And there are people that I know who've experienced trauma that talk about that experience as they've gone through these sort of grueling experiences. And sometimes it can be within families, sometimes it can be within community. I still say that I'm affected by the 67 riots in Detroit. And one of the things that I think about with that, I have other friends who grew up in places where there's a friend that I have who has done a film and written a book about her trauma experiences. And one of the things that I learned from her are the issues of triggers that exist in the community, and they can be things that remind you of the experience that you had in that environment, and that they may not be known to people who are around you, but they're very present in your reality. And the thing I think about is, how do we become aware of those challenges that other people experience? So when we talk about young Black men and older Black men who, go to places and then they see police run up on them, or are in the environment and they realize that they've been stopped and harassed by the police, or they're in a work environment that creates challenges for them too. How do we become aware of those potential triggers for them, but also get them, we talked about the issue of recognition, to become aware of that and then understand how to respond to it in a way that can be hopeful. And I'm glad that we're talking about healing so much. I believe in the path to healing for us, and if as we become aware of what those issues and challenges are, but also a way for people to, as we talked about today, recognize, the triggers and the challenges that they experience, and how to be able to reach out, and talk about them, and to be able to respond to them. And I think in a very positive way, but not to deal with it alone. And that we should be able to find ways to have conversations among ourselves. One, I think, is certainly listening to this program. But I think other things is finding a collective space where we can get together and share those stories with one another. And with that, what I'll do is I think I'll pass the talking stick to Brenda. You're on mute, Brenda.
I was thinking, Dr. Williams, when you were talking about the response and awareness to trauma, that has, as Representative Omar talked about, so much has been layered over the past 2 weeks, but especially over the past 2 years. And we've been talking all week on Al's program about how we're going to help our children respond, especially to what happened in Texas, and then Black children as far as what happened in Buffalo. Because I've heard from a lot of my former students, my own daughters, they're afraid. They are afraid and traumatized in their Black skin. We can't go to church. We can't go to the show. We can't go to school. But we have to stop concentrating on the can'ts. And we have to find a way, especially to give them a place to come to. Everyone's not going to respond maybe to the African American Child Wellness Institute, but they have to have places to come and they have to have people who are trained. I'm doing an article right now on mental health and peers. And they're finding that youth peers, the older children working with the younger ones, and being able to let the kids be comfortable to be able to talk about what they're hearing. So I'm gonna just cut it. This week has been tough, and I've had some tears, especially when I've seen the parents. And I can't even imagine coming home and looking at your child's room and knowing that you never got a chance to say goodbye. You never got a chance to say, I love you. And you got to figure out what's going to happen this summer. A lot of my friends are gone. There was one kid that survived. Think of the survival and I just can't imagine as a former educator. Last thing, we have to build it into the teacher training. They got to know how to deal with what we're going through in current times. These kids have been through the pandemic, they've been through racial upheaval, their parents have been traumatized and stressed, but we cannot give up on what we have to do for these babies. So I'm going to pass it back. And Anthony, by the way, I love your mom. I wrote about her early on. I don't know if you had heard the story, our Miss Kingston, but Al and I went to kindergarten together in Kansas City. And we have sort of a contingency of Kansas City people. And to have been 5 years old, and now 70 years later, I'm writing for my friend, and we bringing up all of these memories of our childhood being on 28th. And the difference was we had some tough parents, we had some believers, lovers of spirituality. We knew our history. It was all different. And our neighborhoods were so cohesive. And we've got to get back there. And your mother is one powerful lady. I don't know between Professor Muhammad El-Kati, and I'm an outsider, Anthony. I live in the mountains of Santa Fe. So I've been writing for 2 years about a city I've never visited. And so Al says I'm doing a crash course on Minnesota. He's right. But anyway, I just wanted to add that, and I'm going to give it back to Al. But she's a beautiful lady, powerful, powerful. So you got to be proud, and she's awfully proud of you.
Yes, she is.
I'll take the talking stick. I'm going to pass it straight over to Anthony. It's a great setup, Anthony, because take a minute to talk about the work of the Cultural Wellness Center and your mom's work as a visionary leader and organizer and entrepreneur, social entrepreneur in our community. And then bring Jessi back in, because I can't overstate the importance of this relationship between North Memorial and the Cultural Wellness Center institutions, but also between Jessi, the human being, and Anthony, the human being, and all of us who are here as companions, focused on creating the kind of community that represents the vision of our attainment, of our pursuit with intentionality of self-actualization for us as individuals and for our communities, our families, and for humanity. Anthony, you have the talking stick.
Well, thank you. And you're right. My mother's amazing. Like I said,
she is.
She's amazing. And I think she is also, really a great lesson for me always. And so I think the work that we're doing right now, the Cultural Wellness Center, was founded over 25 years ago in South Minneapolis at Bloomington and Lake, looking at this idea very specifically of the intersection of culture and health, and really understanding how can we in a real way influence the disparities we were seeing in all the cultural communities in the South Side, as a melting pot. In Alina, we had a hospital right there, But so the work really began around that idea. And as they moved into it, they really began to design an approach that really began to look again as this idea of culture as a foundational asset for well-being, that it was really, again, again, what you described earlier, Dr. D, is that it is a bigger concept, right? And that the idea of well-being, particularly in communities of culture that have been historically marginalized, it was about reclaiming identity. It was reclaiming cultural practices and understanding that the ways that we relate to the world, the ways that we see family, is really grounded in cultural approaches. And so, one of the things I talk about in all cultural communities is really unique. And one of the only communities it doesn't exist in is a European community, is this idea of, I just call it kind of the auntie and uncle philosophy of the world, right? Is that I, okay, if you know my mother and she knows you well, then as my auntie, right, it shows up a certain way. And so it talks to this collective approach to well-being inside of community as well. And I think that one of the elements of it that we are trying to restore in community is this idea of very, very specifically that the idea of that especially in communities and individuals who've experienced trauma, that we as the community, as individuals, are the agents in restoring our own well-being. And that's a really big idea. And if we commit to that concept, that then allows me to engage with North Memorial in a way that is actually constructive, that rebalances the power dynamic. I mean, all these elements begin to be real, that we then see the strength of resources in community again, as Dr. D, as Dr. Oliver, as L. McFarlane, those things. And so again, we reestablish those cultural elements that lead to our own well-being that you all are describing. And so that has been an approach that we've been applying to healthcare, to education, most recently to development broadly. And really what we see is this idea of partnership. So again, I think you're right, that you have to, I think I said this earlier, that, really it is, North Memorial made an amazing choice in choosing Jessi. That they have made an amazing choice because her integrity is real. Like, she is not kidding. She's coming here and bringing the resources and power and working diligently, but the accountability to community is a primary driving force. And so our partnership is aligned around that commitment inside community. And again, we are, we really take it very seriously. I feel, a kinship and brotherhood around that mission. And again, as we step forward, this is really what we're bringing. And I think, again, the power, resources, and the ability to deliver is really going to be a part of it. So again, we will be relying on you all. So I'll pass it to Sister Jessi.
Well, thank you, Brother Anthony. It's really, for me, been an honor to get to know you and your mother, Elder Atum. Too often, I think, when I look at the Black community and what society tells us, it's not positive, right? The words aren't there. And so we live and relive in trauma. And when I first had a conversation with Anthony, I was amazed at the way in which he reframed how we should be looking at health. Because I look at all of you on this screen and I know that we are not the words that we see in the media. We are amazing, courageous, thoughtful, authentic people. And that's what we want to get to. Too often we've been thinking about health as, again, this is the disease. We need to be moving beyond that. And it's important to be aligned with people in this community who can help us have that conversation in ways that we haven't been doing that before. And that's why I've just been honored and thrilled to to be working with Anthony, Elder Toom, all the entire team at Cultural Wellness Center, and also to be here with all of you, because Anthony is right. This is a partnership. We will be doing this together to also hear all of your voices of what we need to do moving forward.
Let me jump in again, and Jessi, thank you for bringing another dimension into this conversation. In your short kind of personal bio, you led by saying that you were adopted by white parents, and I think in saying that you revealed that consciousness is consciousness, and the ability to be human is a global capability. And you also said that you are evidence that the commitment to human development, is something that we own, and that in your experience in the family that you grew up in, that ideal was treasured, and you live and walk in that spirit right now, and you're deconstructing the false narratives about who we are, and with intention, bringing truth, bringing new narratives that celebrate, reflect, elevate the uh, capacity to deliver solutions from within our community. With that, I'm going to pass it to Dr. B and Dr. Oliver to kind of wrap this up. Dr. B, what do you think?
Well, I think this is a beautiful way to, a beautiful culmination to our talk today together, how the conversation flowed from one piece or aspect of wellness to another. And I really, really appreciate the notion of brave and courageous leadership. And what that means is you're turning the volume up on people's whose voices were quieted for many, many years. And that voice is suddenly, at least in that system, having having a place that is brighter and lighter than it's been before, a place where the volume is up on what we are needing and what we want to do. And I think the whole point of today's getting together at this on this wellness on this healing circle was about the fact that we can heal. We're not talking about a lack of possibility. We're just trying to figure out how. And so I'm going to close with just this quick saying. I'll give Brother Oliver the last sentence. But there's a saying that I say often, and it is that an old woman taught me once. She said, "You cannot teach a wound or a cut to heal. Your job is to create a space and a condition for that healing to take place." And that's what I'm hearing today. That's what I'm hearing from North Memorial. That's what I'm hearing from Representative Omar. Let's create that space for the healing to take place. So, Brother Oliver, you got at least 60 seconds to take it on home.
Well, first, I'm really happy to see Anthony, too. He's my brother. And we get a chance to talk to each other and call each other when we have wounds. And as we are talking about healing, I think of Bishop Roderick Mitchell, who's in Mississippi. And he grew up in a household where there was a lot of domestic violence. And the way he described, but he's developed a ministry to address it within his church and the other 34 churches he's got responsibility for. And he says that when you deal with a wound, there's a period of time when it hurts. But he says over time, one of the things that happens is that you have a scar, but you get a chance to get that wound to heal. And you can tap on it, and when it's healed, it doesn't hurt anymore. And we've got to find some way to be able to create environments where wounds can heal. And that we can, and as Anthony's talking about and as Jessi's talking about, the idea of creating an environment where we can heal and we find ways to be able to be proactive about it. Not to make it heal, but it has to go through its own process to do it, but to accomplish that task. And I appreciated being in the conversation today.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. What a wonderful conversation. A great way to end and go into a wonderful weekend here. Let me tell you that on Monday, we're going to be talking with Representative Rena Moran about the closing or the of the legislative session. Probably other legislators on as well. We had Bobby Joe Champion on earlier in the week. On Tuesday, we'll have a conversation with Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, among others. And so we've got a lot of great things on the agenda for this program. Phenomenal conversations. We had a great conversation last week that included Sister Williams, Dr. Williams' partner in life.
Sonia.
And she was on for a second today, but didn't stay with us. But through her, we are going to broaden our conversation about our presence throughout the diaspora, through the Afro-Latino, the Afro-Descendiente community here in Minnesota and in the Caribbean and North and South America. So we've got a lot to do, a lot of building, a lot of connecting, and I think we're going to enjoy creating a vision of who we are going to become as we heal. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Regards to Mother Atune.
I will send a hello from everybody.
Thank you.